Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchedoye olahadi samya samputoshi.
Namo sadanto suchedoye olahadi samya samputoshi.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Hey, 师父上人，各位师生，大家阿弥陀佛。Venerable Master, Dhamma friends, welcome to our Sutra lecture today. Glad you're here. Wherever you may be listening around the world, we appreciate your efforts. And we've got our translator today is translating from northwestern Washington up in the Cascade Mountains of not far from Seattle. And our Vietnamese translator is hundreds of miles south of that, down in the Bay Area of San Francisco. And our hardworking volunteer staff here at Gold Coast Dharma Realm, which today is one guy. Everything. Sam has got to even drive over and pick me up and do the Dharma request and get everything set up. Hard work to bring these lectures out to the world, and grateful for everybody's efforts in doing that. Let's put our hearts together in requesting the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the Flower Garland Assembly to draw near. Bless everybody. This is the invocation part. Here we go. Fresh set of new strings on the banjo makes a difference. And we would like to respectfully acknowledge Kumbh people of the Uganda language region as traditional storytellers and custodians of the land where the monastery is located, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to all First Nations people whose sovereignty was never ceded. 我们恭敬地承认与安倍语族的贡布马里人是我们这里寺院所在地的传统叙事者和守护人。我们向过去、现在和未来的长者们致敬，并且向所有从来没有放弃主权的第一民族的原住民致敬。About this acknowledgement of country is fascinating. I'm collecting different acknowledgements of country wherever I go. Went to our art museum here in the Gold Coast at Hota, Home of the Arts, and they had a beautiful acknowledgement of country. Then went to where was the other? An official building, a government building, and they had their own acknowledgement of the land that they were located on. And then, as I mentioned to folks, coming into Sydney on Virgin Australia Airlines, the flight attendant welcomed us to Sydney in the name of the local tribe, the local community, the indigenous folks who were there. And it's just, it puts you in a different relationship to your body and to the planet around you. It's a wonderful sense of belonging and respect. And you think, oh, well, I'm someone's guest, so I need to behave, not mess up. So now I've encountered websites in Australia, certain websites that at the bottom of their page, they say everything that we do is done with the awareness that we are not the first people here, we are just the next group of people here. And if we do well, then the people who follow behind us, our descendants, will have a sense of respect and a sense of connection and belonging. So very, very wonderful. The Dharma side of this is just so obvious that we talk about Buddhism being 2,500 years old in our telling of the story from our Buddha, Shakyamuni, and yet the Aboriginal friends, ancestors, go back 5 times longer in a straight line, back to kind of the dawn of humanity. And that wisdom is, although it might not be expressed in sutras, it's a wisdom that connects to the land, a sense of belonging and the way the human side of things is done. So once we know who the humans are, then we can figure out our relationship to heaven and to the planet. So yeah, I'm really pleased that this is a bit of wisdom that we've inherited from although the things done to Aboriginal folks here in Australia are cruel and painful to relate, there was something good that came out of it, which is we who came later woke up and learned. Okay, here we go. Bell sound wide resounds throughout 100 million worlds. The Buddha's law is heard and spread all throughout the triple world. The wondrous sounds that everywhere fill the Dharma realm with peace. May those who hear it gain the strength to follow in faith the Buddha's path. 众生传，三千劫内，佛法扬万亿国中，恭训其法界和平，利益报贪乱厚德。Okay, there we go. So, welcome everybody once again, and today is a very special part of our story. As I introduce the story of Suda, our pilgrim, in the chapter 39, which is called the Ru Fa Jie Pin, the chapter on merging with the Dharma realm, or Thomas Cleary translated it as entering the realm of reality. But the Ru we can do better than enter for this word Ru, because it's not that you cross over a threshold and you're in a different space. It's that the atoms of your body, the essence of your Buddha nature, whatever that is, merges with, integrates with, becomes one with. So there's no moving from one place to the other. It's that your identity is now one and the same. That's a subtle difference, and it's an important one. Anyway, so we think of it as I've been talking about it as an epic. Epic literature is, I don't know how you translate that. Simon, how do you translate epic in Chinese? So it's a story with a hero who goes on a journey and has a mission, has a quest, and the best epics, the hero succeeds, but they get transformed in the process. And often, according to Joseph Campbell, who studied and is probably the best known chronicler of the hero's journey, the hero gets wounded in the process and comes home different, sadder but wiser, much wiser. And now our people think, well, how does that apply to Sudana? And in fact, it applies perfectly to Sudana. Sudana, it's sad in a way. That's not the right. Let me start over with that. Too bad that Joseph Campbell couldn't read the Gandavyuha, entering the Dharma realm, merging with the Dharma realm, chapter 39, before he wrote Hero's Journey, because Sudana's quest would be the number one example of what he was explaining. So Sudana, does he get wounded in the process? Yes, he does. In fact, we're not there. We have to travel. We have to read a lot more encounters. We're only on encounter number 3 at this point. But Sudana meets a Brahmin who's, in order to cultivate the way, the Brahmin mutilates his body, climbs a tree of knives, and jumps into a pot of boiling oil. And Sudana goes, yeah, this is a demon. He's going to destroy my quest. And one by one, the gods come down from heaven and say, no, big mistake. Don't misunderstand him. He is really a good advisor. You gotta do what he says in order to progress, in order to take the next step. Then they go on and explain that this Wenre, the Brahmin whose insatiable heat is his name, he subjects his body to the 5 fires and does all this mortification, but he does so in order to, quote, purify his bodhisattva practices. That's the Buddhist jargon for what he does. And they say every time that this Brahmin subjects his body to the 5 fires, our ignorance burns away and bright light is released throughout the universe. And we used to be so proud of our palaces. Say the Brahma gods, gods from the Brahma heaven get to fly around in palaces, flying palaces. Quite a marvelous way of travel, the way the Sutra describes it. And he says, when the Brahman subjects his body to the 5 fires, something that we were so proud of before, we now see as just nothing more than a clump of ink, it says. So Sudana goes, gulp. Oh no, I guess I have to do this. And so he rushes up to the tree of knives and throws his body into the flaming oil and instantly experiences coolness and clarity and insight and says, oh, I really never should have doubted my good advisor, he said. So the lesson is, don't doubt your shanzhishu. You need to accept the teachings of your teacher without objection, without doubts. So yeah, he gets wounded, but the he that gets wounded is the self, the false self. So there is very much a sense of transformation happening in Sudana's encounter with each of his teachers. Today's story is just amazing. Folks will remember, catch up to last week. Last week we looked at lotuses because the sutra talked about this giant lotus that came out of the ocean where the teacher, whose name is Haiyun, ocean clouds, clouded ocean, cloudy ocean, ocean clouds, Haiyun, he examines Sudana's Bodhi resolve. That's the first thing he always does. And Sudana says, yeah, I made the Bodhi resolve. And the teacher says, oh, somebody who does that is going to have these qualities. And if you don't have these qualities, you won't make the real Bodhi resolve. So you won't set foot on the Bodhisattva path, which is what you're asking about, right? Sudana, was like, yeah, tell me more. You're my teacher. I want to learn from you. So the teacher says, I've been living by the ocean side for 12 years, he says. Begins to tell his story. Once Sudana qualifies to be a student, the teacher starts to teach him. And he says, I've been here for 12 years, and I contemplate the ocean. That's been my basic challenge. I just look at the ocean. And then he lists the qualities of the ocean that he loves. And of course, there's a level where he's not talking about the ocean, he's talking about his mind. And so we made those correlations. Then he says, there's nothing more vast, there's nothing more infinite, there's nothing more special than the ocean. And he describes all the things that the ocean bring to the contemplation. And then he says, while I was contemplating in this way, this lotus flower came right out of the ocean. And that's where we got last week. And I showed a bunch of photos taken right here at Gold Coast Dharma Realm, here in Queensland, Australia, of magnificent, incredible lotus flowers that grow here. And told the story of landing in Bangkok the first time and being on a bus stuck in traffic and looking out the window at the roadside ditch alongside the highway. And it was not a tidy spot. It was kind of an abandoned, just a chunk of real estate alongside the highway. And there was a water ditch that was full of garbage and stuff, detritus from, flotsam and jetsam that had fallen off the freeway. And yet, at the eye level of the windows of the bus were these magnificent, huge, beautiful lotuses. The first ones I'd ever seen with my own eyes, and this was 1978 when I saw them. And there were real lotuses, roots in the filthy water of the ditch, but this pristine, absolutely special blossom high above the water, And it was, there we go. There's the symbol of the Bodhisattva who lives completely engaged in the world, and yet her mind is world transcending and pure. So it's like, that's the Mahayana symbol. That's the Bodhisattva. That's the lotus. So Bhikshu Hai Yun says, I saw this lotus. And he described it last week. And he talked about how millions of Asuras, and he goes through the gods, the dragons, and the Eightfold Pantheon. In sequence, they were all making offerings to the lotus, bowing to it, praising it, enjoying it, making great, considering it as incredibly wonderful. And there were all of these, it describes these things that appeared alongside the lotus. This is like a cosmic event when this lotus flower comes out of the ocean. However, he explains the flower, but today we get something even more wonderful. Something is sitting on the flower. Now, what could that be? Let's find out. Okay. go. Here's the text for today. 此大莲花如来出世善根所起，一切菩萨皆生信要，十方世界无不现前，从如幻法生，如梦法生，清净业生，无正法门之所庄严，入无为印，住无碍门，充满十方一切国度，随顺诸佛深深境界，于无数百千劫，叹气功德不可得尽。Here we go. Get that. There we go. This huge lotus flower came from the transcendental good roots of the thus come one's appearances in the world. It was a source of faith and rejoicing for bodhisattvas. Within the 10 directions worlds, there was no place it failed to appear. It was born from dharmas that are like an illusion. It was born from dharmas that are like a dream. It was born from pure karma. It was adorned by the Dharma method of non-contention. It entered the imprint of the unconditioned. It abided in the door of non-obstruction. It filled up countries in the 10 directions. It accorded with the most profound states of the Buddhas. Throughout countless hundreds of thousands of eons, its excellent virtues could not be praised to an end. Okay, how about that? We're talking about a flower. Amazing how in the Avatamsaka world, flowers come like this. Now, I just realized as I was describing this that I gave everybody a rose. That's not a lotus, that's a rose. I got to change my wallpaper. I put a rose, talking about lotuses, and I put a rose on there. So let's find a, there's the there is right there. Here we go. We're going to find a special lotus here. Let's see, let's get the right lotus. How about that one? That's a good one. There we are. Okay, there's a lotus. Now, look at how the sutra describes. Okay, where did it come from? It came from the 出世间善根如来出生于世出世间的善根. It came from the transcendental good roots. What are the transcendental good roots? It means let's unpack that. That's Buddhist jargon, isn't it? This huge lotus flower came from, okay, the Chinese helps us. What is it? It came from 如来出世善根所起. Okay. When you do Chinese translation, you do what's called the headword technique. You start at the end and go backwards. Came from, that which arose, came from what? What arose? Shangan. What are shangan? We've gone over this a bunch. Called good roots. What are good roots? It's wholesome qualities, good things, goodness. You can just say goodness. Shi, worldly goodness. What kind of worldly goodness? Chu shi, worldly goodness. World leaving, coming out of the world. World transcending goodness. What kind of world transcending goodness? Rulai, Tathagata. Tathagata, world transcending goodness. Okay, so now the translator took it as what? Said it was, I need to get a bigger screen here. Okay, transcendental good roots of thus commons appearances in the world. So if I took this one way, it would be when the Buddha appears in the world, good things happen. What kind of good things? Things that let us leave the world. Transcendental good roots. It's like, okay, so let's trace this back. Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in the world 2,500 years ago as a prince in an Indian family. We're still talking about him. for example, I told my story about bowing in the city of Santa Cruz, California, on a Sunday morning, and this guy came to the door. We were in on a residential street, an urban street with little 50-foot lots and houses one after the other. And we were bowing in front of this house down the block. And the house was up higher than the street. And so cars had to be parked on the driveway on a slant. So I've seen this in the Gold Coast too, so that if you let the handbrake go, the car would roll back down into the street because it's parked on a slope. So we were in front of this house with a pickup truck, parked on a slant just above the sidewalk. And this guy came to the door and he saw us, and he was very, very unhappy. "Hey, you can't do that here. What are you kissing the ground for? I don't let you do that in front of my house," he said. He was really upset. And so the guy got more and more angry. "Hey, I told you can't do that." And so he comes out and he has his car keys, his truck keys, his ute keys, utility vehicle, a ute in Australia. And he opens the door of his ute and he jumps in, and he's going to roll down and squash me because I'm right under the tires of his truck when I'm bowing. And so on the spot, happily, the Dharma protector, Heng Chao, goes over and with a smile says, good morning, nice to see you. Hey, can I give you a press release? We're Buddhist monks. We're making a pilgrimage for world peace, going to the city of 10,000 Buddhas up in Ukiah. We just happened to be at this point in our journey in Santa Cruz this morning, so I'd like to make sure you know the whole story here. And this guy he didn't talk to that many people before, and here is this smiling, friendly, charismatic, bald-headed Buddhist monk looking inches from his face in his truck window, smiling at him and saying, world peace. And the guy goes, "What? You what? Oh, Buddhists? Oh yeah, Buddhists. Oh, Buddha. Oh, he's the peace guy. Oh yeah, I got nothing against you guys. I thought you were the other ones, the ones, the bung, 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 bung." So the guy, oh yeah, good luck, fellas. Yeah, no, I'm all for that, he says. So that is a transcendental good root of the Buddha's appearing in the world, the thus come one's appearance in the world. Because this guy, did he know anything about Buddhism? Yeah, he did. He knew the Buddha was the peace guy. So as a result, he didn't have any problem with us. And he thought if we had been the other group who he didn't like, he would have squished me. So that is a wholesome quality. That's a world-transcending quality, echoing down 2,500 years from the Buddha's appearance in the world. So you have to unpack this, the jargon, if you're going to make sense of it. I would probably, the Chinese to me says, the Tathagata's world-transcending good roots, the Buddha's own wholesome qualities that allowed him to leave the world and what came from that. Yeah, I guess I see how they translate. Okay, I think that'll do for that. Okay, then that's where the lotus flower came from. This huge lotus flower came from those wholesome qualities. So think of all the goodness. There's another wonderful story that illustrates it perfectly, which is Ashoka, King Ashoka. Oh my. There is this famous story. King Ashoka, Ayuwang, was a legendary, cruel tyrant in India. He was, I don't have his dates off the top of my head, but King Ashoka was famous for cruelty. He had, according to some accounts, a punishment city. He had a city, a citadel or a compound or a castle where the job of people in the castle were punishing humans, and they did it in cruel, evil ways. And if you went into the gates of this palace, you never came out, because you died in unusual and cruel ways, brutal place. And at some point, the King Ashoka's nation went to war with the other India, Kalinga. He went to war with the Kalinga nation. And I guess it's Liu Li Wang was the name in Chinese. And the war was so horrific that hundreds of thousands of soldiers died in a brief period of time. The scale of the death of this senseless war was so shocking that King Ashoka, going out to, I don't know who won. Did he win or did he lose, or was it just a stalemate? But this evil-minded, insensitive, cruel king who loved to inflict suffering on his citizens saw the result, the battlefield, with all these hundreds of thousands of dead soldiers, and it shocked him, and it broke his mind. And he said, this is wrong, this cannot continue. And at that point, started looking for a way to ease his mind of all of the affliction, the guilt and the shame that he felt for having brought all this suffering in the world. It was just, the war was so terrible that it shocked him. So that's one story. Now, the story that Shifu tells, that's a historical account of King Ashoka. I stopped too soon. After this experience that he had of being just terrified of what he had caused, what he had brought into the world, he found Buddhism and changed so thoroughly that we don't know Ashoka. History doesn't record his cruelty. History records the goodness that he did. He created these edicts, which is rules, turned India, at least under his control, there were other kings, but the India under his control became a national game refuge. There could be no killing of any animal. He made a law for vegetarian eating. There were no killing to happen. And he erected these pillars, and Ashoka's pillars traveled all over Southeast Asia and East Asia, so that they appeared in China as well, down into Vietnam and Thailand. And the edicts, his rules, his laws, turning India into a place cruelty-free, were carved onto the pillars. So if you go to India now, you can actually find Ashokan pillars, and the few that remain, and they're also in museums and in places. So King Ashoka's transformation was truly total and far-reaching. So that's how history remembers him. Now, as I said, Shifu tells another story. There's a story within an additional story. There's a story within the Sangha, kind of a story that's handed from generation to generation. Is it necessarily historic, matching the facts? Don't know, wasn't there. But the story that Shifu tells is that King Ashoka, with his punishment city, his city of horrendous cruelty, one day a Buddhist monk showed up, and he was arrested and went into the city through the gates, and the king, in his cruelty, told his wardens to punish this monk all the same, to really let him have it as he let him die in cruel ways. And so they threw him into a furnace, burned him alive. And the warden went in to sweep out the ashes and found the monk sitting in full lotus with a smile on his face in the middle of the flames. He didn't die. And he reported that to the king, and the king was like, what? How is this possible? Add more wood to the fire. Make it hotter. So they tried to kill him, and they couldn't kill him. And the monk, of course, the king was like, what's going on? So the monk came out unharmed and explained the Dharma for him and said, I don't have negative karma. It's not, my time has not come. There's no reason for me to die now. So you can't kill me. And this shocked the king. And so the king wanted to investigate, and the monk said, you, on the other hand, your karma is really terrible. You need to clean up your act, or you will suffer, infinite misery for life after life for what you've done. So the monk miraculously was able to save, as our jargon is, to take across the King Ashoka. So there's that story. There's another aspect of the story that I don't have all the details. It has to do with King Ashoka's sister and a golden hairpin, that how King Ashoka found his way to Buddhism. So I'll research that story and relate it later. So there is an account of world transcending good roots of thus come when appearing in the world, which made a big difference. King Ashoka turned India into a sanctuary, into a game preserve, became a source of faith and rejoicing for bodhisattvas. Okay, next, within the 10 directions worlds, in worlds north, south, east, west, the intermediates above and below, there was no place the lotus failed to appear. How is that possible? Again, it's the mind. It's the mind that is unobstructed by attachments, by false thinking, by afflictions and ignorance. So we know about, so you think, well, what kind of sleight of hand, what kind of magic is happening to allow a lotus flower to appear in all directions? How is that possible? Trying to explain this, the monk whose name was Fa Zhang was the third Avatamsaka, third patriarch, the third teacher of the Avatamsaka school. He wanted to make this make sense to the Empress of China, Wu Zetian. So she was a Buddhist, but she was also super, skeptical and savvy, and she was nobody's fool. And she would nod her head and say, that's really a wonderful principle, Bhante, but, I don't really grasp the essence of it. Can you explain it? And so what did Master Fa Zhang do? He set up a special room with mirrors facing each other, and he took a golden lion, an image of a golden lion, and set it in the center, and then the way he arranged the inter-reflecting mirrors, when the Empress came down and looked at the golden lion, she could see the reflections reflecting in each mirror, and the reflections reflecting, which reflected reflections, and out into infinity. There was no place that the golden lion suddenly didn't appear. So it's like Indra's net, which has that same function. So she was delighted. Oh, the Empress was so pleased, because here it was, her own human eyes could see something that is a description of the mind. That when there's no obstruction in the mind, we can reflect the thoughts of all living beings. Likewise, all living beings can similarly perceive our thought, our mind, whatever thought appears in that mind. Sadly, we're mostly not clear like that, so it's still a potential. But with the the golden lion example, Master Fazang was able to show her how this could be the case. Chong chong wu jin, as they say, infinitely reflecting without obstruction. What else? Okay, now we get into the lotus. What are the qualities? We get, it's born from dharmas like an illusion, born from, the Chinese has shama shama sheng, was born from. There's that word, it repeats. Where did it come from? The lotus came from dharmas that are like an illusion. What's an illusion like? You see it, but you know it's not real. It's illusory. It's happening in the mind, but if you go to grab it or get a picture of it, it's not there. Born from dharmas that are like a dream. Wake up and gone, right? But while you're dreaming, it seems so real. Born from the Buddha's pure karma. So pure karma means no residue, no repercussions that require, round 2, chapter 2. Oh, and there's revenge involved, and then the revenge requires revenge. And that's impure karma, deeds that incite others, greed, anger, or delusion, and require them to react to you. That's impure karma. So the Buddha acts. It's not that the Buddha doesn't do anything, but he does it in a way that doesn't involve the requiring response from living beings. Adorned by the Dharma method of non-contention. I really like this one. Check this out. It's Wu Zheng Fa Men Zhi So Zhuang Yan. Let's do our translation method. Zhuang Yan, So Zhuang Yan. It's made special. We say adorned. Adorned means much more than decorated. If you think adorned is kind of like a wreath at Christmas on the door, or a new coat of paint, internal decoration, that means much more than that. It means made splendid, made magnificent, made massive and awesome by Wu Zheng Fa Men. This is the possessive particle. So made splendid by gate. What kind of gate? Dharma gate. What kind of Dharma gate? Fighting Dharma gate. What kind of fighting Dharma gate? No fighting Dharma gateway. So it's made splendid by practices so Dharma gateway means entries into the Dharma that have to do with not fighting. So that's what produced the lotus flower was, hold that thought, adorned by the Dharma method of non-contention. That sounds like what? That makes no sense, right? So you say it came from practices of never fighting, of Bu Zheng, and there you go. That's Master Hua's first of the 6 guidelines, Bu Zheng, Bu Tan, Bu Qiu, right? No fighting. I had when we were just in Vancouver just a few weeks ago already. Wow, seems like it was yesterday. And one of the, I believe it was Dharma Master Chur or Dharma Master Liang, who reminded me of the way Master Hua demonstrated no fighting. So what was it? We were one of the first Buddhist groups in Vancouver. Along with us was a Taiwanese monastery with bhikshunis, and there was also a layman's group out on 47th Street, 47th Avenue. So there were basically 2 Mahayana Buddhist groups in Vancouver back in the 80s when we arrived. One was a layman's group, and the other was a bhikshuni's monastery. And so suddenly, here comes 法界佛教总会宣化上人. Shifu is a highly renowned Chan master. Lu Mei Gaoseng, the noble monk who brought the Dharma to the West. Clearly, when our ship sails into Vancouver, all of the Chinese Buddhists are going to come and attend the big teachers' talks and take refuge and do the ceremonies and all. And the nuns' temple and the layman's temple will suffer. Of course, that's, it just makes sense. Because they're going to think, oh, I want to take refuge with Master Xuanhua. He's really famous. And he's a monk. He's not monks are senior than lay people, certainly. So what did Shifu do? Instead of creating a condition whereby the other two Buddhist places would be unhappy because they would lose their disciples, clearly that's that's the way they survive. What did Shifu do? He said, both those two temples are almost entirely Chinese language centered. They don't do English. So here's what you do. I want my monks to lecture on sutras twice a day. They do it 7 days a week, after lunch, and then in the evening, twice a day. And from Monday to Friday, you can lecture in English, Mandarin, and translate into Cantonese, the way you do. 3 languages, which is that's another whole story. He said, you can use all 3 languages from Monday to Friday. Nobody goes to the other Buddhist places Monday to Friday. They're all going to work. Vancouver is a very hard-working city. Everybody's out there making money. He said, on the weekend, when those 2 places get all their disciples, we will stick to English here. We do English only here on Saturday and Sunday. Anybody who wants to come to Gold Buddha Monastery on Saturday and Sunday will have to learn English with us. We'll study English, and that's how we'll turn the Dharma wheel. That way, the Chinese-speaking monasteries can keep their disciples home. I'm not going to poach their disciples, he said, unless they want to hear English Dharma, in which case they're welcome to come to Gold Buddha. I'd forgotten that that's how Shifu did it. And what a elegant, peaceful way to practice buzheng, non-contention. I thought, wow, that's really good. That Shifu would do it that way, right? I had forgotten. And he's demonstrating, not simply preaching, no fighting. As a result, those monasteries, this monk is a really good teacher. We're so glad that we're not in contention with him. So they invited Shifu over for any of their holidays, and we were in the habit of going over and visiting. So, yeah, quite wonderful. Okay, now, check this one out. It entered the imprint of the unconditioned. It's like, is that English? It entered the imprint of the unconditioned. What in the world? Ru Wei Yin. Now, how do you explain? Ru Wei Yin. Okay, let's use our method. Yin is a seal, like a sealing wax on your envelope. It's like a signet ring that you stamp something with. In Chinese art world, after you do calligraphy or a painting, you gai tu zhang, you dip it in the red ink and then press your seal onto the paper. And famous paintings and calligraphy collect the seals, right? With just all these red spots on them. That's a yin. Okay, now, what does it mean in terms of the Dharma? So let's call it an imprint, or an imprimatur, or a seal, not like the seal, not the animal, the Pacific sea lion, but a seal to seal a letter. What kind of seal? Wei, in action. This is particularly a Taoist term, although the Taoists don't own it. But it's been the source of libraries full of books describing Wu Wei. Let's just use the Taoist meaning. It's everything is done through inaction. So what does the sage do? The sage doesn't move, but simply by understanding harmony and the Tao, they're never out of step. That's the beauty of Wu Wei. It means literally no doing, inaction, lack of action. But the sage is so wise and so aware of the movements of the Tao. The Tao is always moving. The Tao is the way things are before words and thought. And it requires lots of action to stay, kind of like riding a bicycle. What is the Tao of riding a bike? You have to keep moving so you don't fall over. You can do Wu Wei bicycle riding by just pedaling enough to stay upright. And it seems magical, but you're just moving right along. Okay, so that's Wu Wei. It doesn't mean you're a bump on a log. It means every action is done so perfectly that it seems like nothing happened. The sage, says the Tao Te Ching, the sage acts in a way so that everything is done perfectly and it seems like he was or she was not involved. It's real skill. So what kind of a seal of creative inaction? You ru, here's our word again. You enter, you merge with, you integrate with the imprint. So the imprint is not a physical thing. It's a, does anybody grow up with in your childhood, did you, okay, I'll start that sentence over again. When I was growing up, Christmas was a big deal in our home. And Christmas, my mother had a collection of little aluminum outlines called cookie cutters. And at some point, they were used one time a year. The cookie cutters included a star, a Christmas tree, a Santa Claus with his bag, a bell, like a church bell, and a few other shapes. And she would mix flour, water, sugar, probably egg whites or something, into dough, and then cookie dough, and then she would roll it into a roll and then cut it, and then with the rolling pin, flatten out little segments of cookie dough. And then we would take the cookie cutters and put them down onto the dough, and then out would come a Christmas tree shaped piece of cookie dough and a Santa Claus shaped cookie dough shape, and then a bell, and then a star. And then we would add sprinkles, multicolored sprinkles, or frosting, and then bake them, and those are Christmas cookies. So those cookie cutters are the yin. They're the seal, the imprint, the shape of. So what is the imprint of Wu Wei? It's understanding the Tao in everything that you do. So the shapes, the actions, the deeds that you do merge, integrate with this Wu Wei, which is just another name for the Tao, meaning everything you do is perfect. That's what created the lotus. This kind of behavior is the goodness that produced the lotus. All right? So it takes a lot of words to get past the jargon. It entered the imprint of the unconditioned. I mean, seriously, what does that mean to anybody? And yet, how do you have to leave a paragraph to explain it? This is what we call Buddhist code. and it's like a tea leaf. Before I came, Sam picked me up and I took this thermos and I counted out 12 tea leaves. It's too hot, I'll burn myself if I bring them out. 12 tea leaves, and they're little tiny nurdles, little tiny tea leaves of Taiwanese Gaoshan cha, Oolong cha. And I dropped them into the thermos and I poured in hot water and then let the hot water do its thing. The leaves are now, each one is this big. And this is tea. It's oolong tea. So before it was just these a dozen little BBs of tea. And now, and it was hot water. So hot water and little tea leaves. When you put them together, it's like, out comes the beverage, and now the leaves are this big. Really, they're huge. This is really good Taiwanese oolong. So it's just like these words, the imprint of the unconditioned. When you add cultivation and experience with the Dharma, suddenly there's meaning that we can grasp. So the lotus flower came about. It was born from constantly behaving in accord with the Tao. That's merging with the imprint of the unconditioned. Okay? Got it. Ding, ding, ding. Okay. It abided in the door of non-obstruction. More of the same. 住无碍man, 4 characters. Doorway, gateway, obstruction, no obstruction. 住, to live, to abide, to stay, to rest. So, abiding in the door of non-obstruction means that where this lotus kind of exists is in flowing. Just say it that way. The door of non-obstruction means, again, no fighting, no opposing, no refusing, and yet no aggression either. It's just constantly in accord. You say it always is in the right place. Fills up countries of the 10 directions, same as the 10 directions, no place it doesn't appear. It accords with the most profound states of the Buddhas. Okay, the lotus flower is like full of light. And, ready? Last one, summary. Through hundreds of thousands of eons, countless numbers, its virtues couldn't be fully praised. You could never finish praising it. Whew! All that for a flower. Amazing. There it is. Okay. There he is. Does he abide in the unconditioned? Is he imprinted with non-action? Nope, I don't think so. Who is this? This is a male koala. He's the first one that many of us have seen in the trees here in our property for a while. And the other night, I went out for a walk later than usual, and I heard the sound that male koalas make, which is a kind of a hooting, grunting sound. And I thought, wow, that's really close. And I walked back down the trail, and there he was, way up high. You can take a look at where koalas abide. Oh, hold on. I need to hide. There we go. There we go. Okay, let me show you how far up he was. I'm going to accord with video sharing. Okay, 92, 91, 90. Let's see if this is, yeah, here's the one right here. Okay, way up there. People say, wow, how go? He's just hanging on way up high. Yeah, but luckily I could hear him and looked up and there he was. That's my thumb in front of the lens right there. Here he is. Whoa. Hi there. Now, people are saying, everybody came out and wanted to see him. I texted a couple people. Cliff came running over and saw him. So the question was, how come we don't see him more often? And the answer, I think, is because it was a full moon, and it was the autumn moon. This is Zhongqiu, Mid-Autumn Festival, so it's also springtime. And it's the mating season, and this is a very healthy, good-looking male koala, probably hoping to meet an eligible female koala, and he was out checking out the territory. The problem is that they're mostly nocturnal, and they only go where certain eucalyptus leaves are. They eat gum tree leaves, but only a certain kind. There's something like 300 different varieties of gum trees in Australia, and they eat like 20 of those 300. Others are not suitable. So they're very picky eaters, and that's all they eat. So they come out late. You have to have those kind of trees around, or else they won't stick around. So we're hoping that he finds a lady friend and sets up house in the neighborhood. That would be nice if we see. There are estimates that there are only 60,000 koalas left in the wild in all of Australia. That's the hard-edged estimate. There are other estimates but there are many more. But there's their threat to these lovely creatures is that we're cutting down their habitat, that many of them get killed by cars on the roads because they're very slow moving. Also that dogs will kill them, and a lot of them get chewed up by dogs. And then they have a disease. There's a disease called chlamydia that they are susceptible to. So here in the Gold Coast at Currumbin Wildlife Hospital, the research is on to get a pure strain of koalas and preserve it so that they don't disappear and that a disease-free strain. So right here in the Gold Coast, some of the cutting-edge research into koalas is happening. And they are not bears. People say, oh, koala bears. No, they're not. They're marsupials. They're not bears. Okay, moving on. You know what happens next? Oh boy, we're ready. Check this out. This is what I was waiting to get to today. Here we go. 我时见壁莲花之上，有一如来结跏趺坐，其身从此上至有顶，宝莲花作不可思议，道场中会不可思议，诸相成就不可思议，随好圆满不可思议，神通变化不可思议，四相清净不可思议，无见顶相不可思议，长广舌相不可思议，善巧演说不可思议，圆满音声不可思议，无边际力不可思议，清净无微不可思议 and finally 广大辩才不可思议。Actually, there's more. We're going to go on down, finish up. We'll go all the way down here. 又念彼佛，妄修诸行不可思议，自在成道不可思议，妙音言法不可思议，普门示现种种庄严不可思议，随其左右见各差别不可思议，一切利益皆令圆满不可思议。Okay, 好。That's all the不可思议s. Here we go. At that time, I saw a thus come one seated in full lotus atop the lotus flower. His body extended all the way up to the summit of existence. His jeweled lotus flower throne was inconceivable. His bodhimanda and assembly were inconceivable. The accomplishment of his hallmarks was inconceivable. His minor characteristics were complete and inconceivable. His spiritual powers and transformations were inconceivable. The purity of his physical characteristics was inconceivable. The hallmark of his invisible crown was inconceivable. His hallmark of his vast voice was inconceivable. His skillful, clever speech was inconceivable. The full and resonant sounds of his voice were inconceivable. His boundless powers were inconceivable. His pure fearlessnesses were inconceivable. His vast great powers of eloquence were inconceivable. Moreover, I recollected that the practices this Buddha cultivated in the past were inconceivable, that his sovereign realizations of the path were inconceivable, that the wonderful voices with which he explained the Dharma were inconceivable, that his method of manifesting adornments was inconceivable, that everything around him was inconceivable, each singularly distinct in appearance. His perfection of benefits was inconceivable. Okay, we read a lot of inconceivables. Let's look at that first. It is buka si buka si, those 4 words. Those 4 words are very much associated with the Avatamsaka, because the sutra is describing things that, as we say, the Buddha spoke the Avatamsaka for devas and for bodhisattvas. So if we have no particular samadhi in our practice, our meditation hasn't integrated body and mind and spirit that way yet, then these things to our ordinary eyes and ears and mind is going to seem, we're going to go, nope, never heard of it, never seen it. That's because it is inconceivable. As soon as somebody masters meditation to the point where they experience this samadhi, the state of integration of body, mind, and spirit, then these things become visible, audible, and thinkable. They become, conceivable? Yeah, you could say that. It's not that the things change, it's that now we can see them. So, buka si, in the traditional definition is buka shinsi, buka yen-i. You can't think of it, and you can't talk about it. All right? So what is conceivable? On one hand, conceive, we use that when it talks about human fertility. When you get pregnant, you conceive of a child, right? Talk about Jesus. Mary conceived Jesus, before he was born in the stable, right, with the oxes and asses, etc. So that's the Christmas story. So that's one kind of conception. But the other kind of conception means think. It's just a cognate homophone for to think. So if you cannot think of it, that means you don't get the pictures in your brain, in your mind, wherever we point to brain or head. Is it head or heart, right? Furthermore, buka yen-i, you can't talk about it either, which means what? It means it goes beyond language. Doesn't mean it's not real. That's the point we want to make here. Inconceivable doesn't mean doesn't exist. It means words don't go there, and it's hard to grasp it in the mind because our minds are limited. Our minds are limited by mostly duality. For example, night and day, black and white, true and false, right and wrong, up and down. Those are all dualities with which we build our world. If we suddenly had to get rid of duality, imagine then you go try to drive your car. Oops, which side of the road am I on? Which side of the paint stripe? Big trouble, right? So duality is, mind you, very useful and essential, necessary for our world to function the way we define it. But we are now looking at a world transcending reality that is not real. It is absolutely real. It's just until we can expand our minds and let go of the need to define it in language and thought, and then suddenly a Buddha sitting on the lotus flower. Okay? Now, can we trace it back? Bhikshu Haiyun says, I've been looking at the ocean for 12 years. Then he goes, wow, the ocean is like da 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 da. His whole list of things, how wonderful it is. Then he says, you know what else? When I was contemplating this way, this lotus appeared. And then he gives us this rhapsody about the lotus. And we just found out today that there were million decorations around the lotus. Then we found out today where it came from. These qualities, okay? Transcendental good roots, all the goodness that it created, still echoing today. Now, he says, I want to take you a step deeper. The lotus didn't appear all by itself. There was a Buddha sitting on it. I keep, whenever I see lotuses here in the Gold Coast Dharma realm, I think, where's the Buddha? Is it I can't see it? Maybe the light isn't right. Maybe if I come down after dark, we'll see the Buddha. Yeah, maybe that movie's over and I missed it or something. So, this lotus appearing before Bhikshu Haiyun has a Buddha on it. So from now on, whenever anybody listening to the lecture sees a lotus, you got to adjust your vision and maybe you can see the Buddha there. However, it definitely will not be limited by language or thought. What follows here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 qualities, each of which are buka sui, inconceivable. However, when I looked at this list, I thought, man, here's the Avatamsaka Sutra telling us what Buddhas are like. And so my next thought was, how do I think of the Buddha? When I think Buddha, what do I think of? And our neighbor in Santa Cruz thought, the peace guy. All right, good enough. That's definitely what the Buddha is to that guy. And luckily he thought of him that way, so I didn't get squashed by his truck. But what else? And we start down the list. Number 1, what's the Buddha like? Big. His body extended all the way up to the summit of existence. What would the summit of existence? Yoding. Okay, so in the Shurangama Sutra, it talks about 25 levels of existence. And it includes all the way from the hells to the bottom. It's a really vertical list. It goes all the way up to, from the desire realm to the form realm to the formless realm. And the formless realm is 4 very sublime, refined states of the gods, devas. They're so refined that their bodies live for a very long time, and they're already beyond physicality. Their consciousness, mostly, they're only a consciousness, so refined, so subtle, and yet they're still, interestingly, mortal. Their life comes to an end at some point. But those are up at the top of the realms of existence. The 25 realms include, like rishis, sages, immortals, who are a class of beings. When Shifu, Master Shenhua, would talk about his youth in Dongbei, in northeast China, there's a range of mountains called Changbai Shan, the tall white mountains. And Shifu would occasionally go visit just when he had the opportunity. They were a range of mountains separating, was it Korea or Russia? Way up in the north of Dongbei. And he said there are caves up there where real Xianren rishis live. And certain levels of meditators yogis know where they are. And if you go out there, they're still there, because immortal means immortal. They don't die. They don't come, they don't go. They're impervious to cold. They don't get email, they don't need to eat, but they're out there in the caves meditating. And he said that he knows their names. Sherpa knew their names and knew the stories. And it's like you hear that and you go, ooh, wow. I wonder if the Rocky Mountains have them. I wonder if the Australian Alps have immortals. So, anyway, the summit of existence, the Shurangama Sutra is the place to go if you want to find out more about all the levels of existence, because it talks about them in detail. And so, what else? That's one thing we know. The Buddha's body is that big. Furthermore, the flower that he's sitting on is also beyond words and thought. Doesn't mean it's not real. It's really, really there, but you can't talk about it. You can't describe it. You can draw pictures of it, but the picture is not the thing. The real lotus flower is really there, and it's Bukasui. Furthermore, the Bodhimanda and the assembly. Now, what is that? Bodhimanda's probably on its way into the English dictionary. It's probably one of those words from Sanskrit that's going to get adopted into English. But it's in Chinese is Puti Dao Chang. And it refers to their different levels of description. The Bodhi tree in India at Bodh Gaya, that's a Bodhimanda, that's the first one. That's the tree under which the Buddha got enlightened. But there's another level of the word which refers to anywhere where people cultivate the way. If you meditate in a certain place and cultivate the way, you could say, how do you know what is a Bodhimanda? Usually there will be adornments there, such as incense to make the fragrance pure. Maybe there will be lights, lamps, or candles, or different kinds of lamps, or sunlight. There will be stained glass, maybe, to make the light adorned and beautiful. There might be offerings of flowers to make it special, a place where spirits will come. There might be fruit or food offered up as a place for people to show their connection to it with respect, and they want to give to it, to participate in it. All these different qualities that make any space. So a Bodhimanda is not a special space, although it can be. If it's a place where people have been doing these things for centuries, then you know it's got a special feng shui, right? The wind and the water there is special. About any place can become a Bodhimanda depending on how humans cultivate there. People, the most powerful thing in existence is the human mind. And so even if the feng shui of a place is not good to begin, if wise people with blessings and virtue cultivate the way there, the place can turn. Likewise, a place that has really good feng shui and is supposed to be sacred space, if people do not cultivate there and they don't come and make offerings, they don't plant blessings there, then nothing is special. It's not a special space. Okay? So that's Bodhimandas. We think about Bodh Gaya, the Bodhi tree. And originally, what was the Bodhi tree? Well, 2,500 years ago, it was a riverbank. And a place with maybe piled up straw, which is where the prince, at the end of 6 years of vigorous cultivation in the bush, in the forest, where he settled. He said, I'm not going to leave this place until I wake up. And probably doesn't mean he didn't sit still. He probably stood up and walked occasionally and, got some food occasionally and had to relieve nature occasionally. It's not that he just sat there. I think that's a misunderstanding. But he said, I'm not going to leave this spot. I'm not going to keep traveling. I'm going to put my roots down here. And it was a suitable spot. It was under a tree. There was a sound of running river close by, so the air was purified with the sound and no further distractions. But most of all, it was a place where the prince, the yogi, turned back his eyes, his ears, his nose, tongue, body, and mind to look within. He said, I'm going to cultivate the mind ground at this spot. That's the traveling I'm going to do now, from now on, is in my mind. Meanwhile, I'm going to sit here so I can do that work in my mind. And sure enough, he woke up. He said, Ye du ming xing er wu dao. At night he saw a bright star. One night he saw a bright star and awoke to the way. Mara tried to distract him and he couldn't, and the Buddha woke up. So that's the historical Bodhimanda at the Bodhi tree. And where that happens, people gather. His assembly, what is an assembly at the Bodhimanda? Well, it's the people who want to learn. And our picture, we have this picture of the Buddha. I should have shown this earlier, shouldn't I? So we've already seen it, Dharma Master. Okay, yes, but you need to see it again. Here he is. Sea cloud. There's the Buddha on the lotus. There's the lotus. And notice the assembly. These are known as Tianlong Babu, right? The gods, the dragons, and the Eightfold Pantheon. Here are all the devas making their offerings up here in the sky. These are the spiritual heavyweights. You can see their rough-looking crowd. Yakshas, Gandharvas, Garudas, Mahoragas, Kinnaras, dragons. Here's Sudana, and there's the bhikshu who's witnessing all this. But what are they looking at? Why do they have their palms together here? They're looking at the Buddha on the lotus. These devas are making music. Here's the Buddha. Now this is an artist's reconstruction of it, but it's very satisfying to get a sense of the assembly gathered around the Buddha. Okay? So, he says, what else? He says, inconceivable. Every bit of this is followed by bukkha sui, inconceivable. Now, take a look here. We've got the accomplishment of hallmarks, minor characteristics, and then physical characteristics, and then hallmark and hallmark. Okay, from here on down, we've got a list of things that are called Sansha Arxiang, Ba Shi Zhong Sei Xing Hao, the 32 hallmarks and the 80 subtle characteristics. We're going to go deeply into this next time. And this list, right, the whole thing, these 20 details are what the sutra says the Buddha brings, which I think is so interesting. Because I challenge myself, how do I see the Buddha? What is the Buddha to me? And that's a really helpful question, I think, to all of us. If we're interested in Buddhism, is who is the Buddha to me? Who's the Buddha to you? Remember this sweet old lady in Vancouver back in the 80s, 1984. Myself and Marty, Bhikshu Heng Chao, Professor Verhoeven, were there. And we got to know these old ladies from Hong Kong, Cantonese-speaking Hong Kong, Lao Tai Tai, Nijushi, these old lay ladies who had been Buddhists their whole lives, and probably their grandparents had been Buddhists, and they knew what Buddhism was, according to southern China, Hong Kong, Cantonese, Guangdong, Guangzhou, Fujian. Largely, ethnically, they were mostly Hong Kong, Cantonese-speaking Hong Kong Buddhists. They would come in the morning. They'd be outside the door at 8 o'clock when we opened the door, waiting to come in. And they would come in, 走法西, 走上法西. And they would take off their coats and their hats and their scarves and their boots and their gloves, because it's Canada. And they would put on their aprons, roll up their sleeves, go down to the kitchen and get the flowers in the vases and light the incense. And they really loved to practice. They were serious cultivators, this group. And there was one old lady who she would show up once a week, usually on a Saturday, and she had one of those little wire trolleys with small wheels for groceries, and she would roll in. She had a knit hat, and she would pull her hat down. We could just barely see her eyes. She'd pull her hat down. She was about 5 feet tall, and she would come in, and she had a bag. She would go up to the altar and reach into the bag and pull out an orange and set it in front of the Buddha. And then she would reach in her bag and she would pull out another orange and set it next to this first one. She would reach in the bag and then pull out a third orange and set it in front of the Buddha. And then she would just turn around and go over to the bench, and she would bow and, do that kind of bowing that they, And then, after about 5 minutes, she would go over and take one orange and put it back in her bag, and then take the second orange and put it back in her bag, and then the third orange and put it back. Everything that she put on the altar, she waited a few minutes for the Buddha to bless them, to put a whammy on the oranges, and then she would take them home and eat them. So who is the Buddha to her? We would watch and we go, she's really sweet, It's like, okay. The Buddha to her was a source of good luck and blessings, and about 5 minutes was enough to give the oranges the special Buddha power, and she would take them home, probably give them to her grandson or her granddaughter. I don't think she wasn't greedy for the benefits herself. She was hoping for luck, hoping for blessings. So most of us, we're somewhere in between. Inconceivable or looking for luck, somewhere in between. So now, next week, I'm going to be away. We're going to have a guest lecture next week. I won't tell you who at this point, but I'll be back in another week. We're going to look at the Buddha's hallmarks, the 80 characteristics, and we're going to ask ourselves, who is the Buddha to me? That's a really useful question as we get the Avatamsaka's description of 20 incredible, inconceivable characteristics of the Buddha. Alrighty. I noticed that Jin Chuan and Jin Wei Shi are here. Hello there.
Hello there, Master. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Jin Wei Shi.
Just want to make an announcement.
Great.
Yeah, when we see, and the first is, we want to announce that Professor Marty Verhoeven is starting the series of lectures after a summer break, and next week, Friday, 7:30, start with meditation, and after meditation, for 45 minutes will be a lecture and Q&A. So he's starting next Friday. It will be every Friday, Marty's Avatamsaka lecture, since until the winter break. It will be somewhere in December. So this is new. And
I want to point out, I'm going to interrupt you and point out that the first 45 minutes of the class online, you're meditating. Right? So some people dial in and think, wait a minute, did I miss it? Why isn't anything happening? It's because Marty is inviting you to meditate with him. The lecture starts at 8:15. So
yeah, those who are online, they also can join meditation. Definitely, you can see Marty sitting.
That's right.
40 minutes in camera is
45 minutes. Yeah, it's great
him.
opportunity. Yep.
Yeah, so the next is an opportunity to join our friends from Insight Meditation Community of Berkeley. James Barras and Yves Decker will offer day long on Sunday, October 6th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Our friends from Spirit Rock Insight Meditation Community of Berkeley. And you see, you have a link if you wish to join. Please register there. And also they return to the monastery in person. So starting on October 10th, and James Barras and Yves Decker at 7:30 every second and fourth Thursday of the month will be here, and people can also join that lecture.
Okay.
And
I want to add that that group has been coming to the Berkeley Monastery since 1995. So do the math. That's a long relationship with meditators in Central Berkeley.
very true. Yeah, and of course they still will offer the classes online, and so you see the first and the third Thursday, if people wish to join, they can register and get a Zoom link and join. So all the informations are on the website, Berkeley website.
Okay.
And Saturday, August 31st, we have still some time. It will be the transference of the dedication of merit for the recitation of Great Compassion Mantra. We do this once a month, and we have people who practice Dabe Jo in the whole globe. You know, we heard this like thousands of a day Dabe Jos, and started since pandemic, and people are still keep going, and they put a lot of heart into this practice. And further, we have an Stephen Tainer. He already started in the fall semester. He's also one of the teachers who are from, there must be correct me, since 1995 as well, right?
Not exactly. No, Stephen came
Really?
later.
Stephen came later.
This was my class for the first, I think, 5 or 6 years.
Ah,
But from in the 20th century, definitely.
20th century, yes. And you know, I know that many people are very happy and benefit from his teaching when he try to connect the Buddhist principle to everyday life. And Reverend Schurz will be lectured tomorrow, and this is a different channel. This is City of 10,000 Buddhas YouTube channel. The link is over here, you can see. 7:30 to 9, this will be tomorrow, Sunday, 10 Transference chapter of Avatamsaka.
And we end it with a story from the life of Master Xuanzang every week. So he is now, Master Xuanzang, and from his biography, he has reached what is currently now Pakistan. Before India partitioned, it was northeastern India. And he's traveling through, and he's telling incredible stories of miracles from the Buddha's life that happened where he is pilgriming through. So it's great stories.
Wonderful. Great. And you see, those people who want to try to join the Chinese orchestra, it's not very common, but in the monastery, you can definitely connect with the Asian sounds. As the Chinese music assemble will meet on the next Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. And definitely it's an experience. And okay, I think their master. Okay, also it's a Friday lecture. Friday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. It's online. Master Shuyun pictorial biography, and also to mention on October 1st, we will have our guests from Thai Forest Monastery Abhayagiri, And I know that Ajahn Pasana is coming, and those who have a chance to meet him, and definitely is a guiding elder right now. He was a co-founder of the monastery, of Agiri Monastery, and definitely encourage people to see him because he's coming to England and will stay there for a year. So one of the last opportunities to hear the teaching. 5 p.m. is tea and Dhamma, followed by 7:30 meditation and lecture.
All righty. Thank you for the news. Appreciate that. Lots of stuff going on in Berkeley. Sam, does our website have? We just. Good. Okay, let's do that. Go to gcdr.org.au. gcdr.org.au. Check it out. And then we go to, let's see here. Scroll down. And here we go. Shurangama mantra recitation. Guanyin recitation. These are, let's see here. This is December. Is that, or let's see. Okay, that's, I can't read Australian dates. So the month is October, right? And this is 12 to 10 to 18. Yeah, so this October 10th to 18th, reciting the Shurangama mantra. Then, later on, Guanyin session. So, there we go. If anybody wants information, just snap that QR code with your phone. Okay, followed by Kids Camp. Look at that. Oh my goodness. This is October 6th, then the 7th. That kookaburra will be there to greet you. And our topic is a fan favorite with kids, impermanence. Every kid wants to know about impermanence, especially when they're shooting arrows with Ben. Ben teaches archery, real archery, and oh my goodness, it's great fun. So we have a terrific staff here that makes these kids' camps genuinely fun. They're really enjoyable, and followed by lunch, which is especially good. Okay, so these are the standard announcements. Go out to gcdr.org.au. Okay, I want people who are looking for the empty cloud lecture for the next 2 weeks. While I am in Singapore, we're going to pause. So next week and the following week, we're going to take a pause on the empty cloud biography, just to let folks know. Alrighty, time to dedicate merit. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all to conclude today, we're going to bow to the Buddha and also to our teacher. Let's bow to the Buddha. Here we go. Please join me. 3 half bows from where you're sitting. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. That's going to do it for us. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Amitofo. Bye-bye now.